From struggling student to self-made entrepreneur, the journey that changed my life. This is the story of how I went from being a broke college student living off ramen noodles to building a six-figure business. It's not glamorous or full of overnight success cliches, but it's real. I hope it helps anyone who's been struggling to find their way. I was a freshman at a large university studying business administration. I had big dreams, but little idea of how to make them come true. My parents had always encouraged me to get a degree and find a stable job, but I felt like there had to be more to life than a 9 to 5 grind. I started out like most college students, working part-time jobs to pay my bills. I sold textbooks, worked at a coffee shop, and tutored high school students in math and science. Despite all that, I could barely cover rent. My social life consisted of cheap beer and late-night study sessions, and my biggest meal was a bowl of instant ramen. One night, as I was scrolling through Reddit, where I spent way too many hours, I stumbled upon a post about drop shipping. It was a typical success story, someone who went from broke to wealthy with just a laptop and a Wi-Fi connection. The post claimed they had made thousands of dollars in profit in a few months by selling products online. I was skeptical, but something about it intrigued me. I thought to myself, why not? What do I have to lose? I spent the next few weeks diving into research. I read articles, watched YouTube tutorials, and joined every online forum I could find. Drop shipping seemed like the perfect way to make money with minimal upfront investment, which was crucial since I didn't have a lot of cash to burn. I was only 19, and my student loans were stacking up, so I figured it was worth trying. The first step was finding a product to sell. I decided to go for something niche, something that wouldn't require tons of competition or big advertising budgets. After hours of research, I landed on selling phone accessories, specifically wireless charging pads. They were simple, practical, and had a growing market. I found a supplier on AliExpress who seemed reliable, and I set up a store on Shopify. It felt like the beginning of something huge. I spent days perfecting my website, tweaking the product descriptions, and setting up Facebook ads. My friends thought I was crazy. They would joke around and say, "Good luck with your e-commerce empire." I didn't let it bother me. Deep down, I felt like I had found something special. The first month was a disaster. I didn't make a single sale. I spent money on Facebook ads, only to watch the money burn without seeing any return. The reality of running a business hit me hard. It wasn't as easy as those success stories made it seem. But instead of giving up, I started analyzing what was going wrong. I revised my ads, reworked my website, and made sure my product images looked professional. I also got feedback from my family and friends who pointed out the areas I was overlooking. Slowly but surely, I started to see small improvements. In the second month, I got my first sale. It was a huge milestone for me. I remember jumping up and down in my room, so excited that anyone, had purchased something from my store. From there, things started to pick up. My sales weren't sky high, but I was consistently making enough to cover my advertising costs and make a small profit. By the third month, I was averaging a few $100s a week. It wasn't a fortune, but it was a start. However, my breakthrough didn't come until I learned the importance of customer service and branding. I had always thought that a good product would sell itself, but I was wrong. One of the most significant factors in growing my business was how I interacted with my customers. I started sending personal thank you notes with each order, responding quickly to customer inquiries, and offering free shipping promotions. People appreciated the effort, and word of mouth started working in my favor. As my sales grew, I realized that I had to scale the business. I reinvested my profits into advertising, expanded my product range, and began optimizing my store for mobile users. I also started using influencers to promote my products. I didn't have a huge budget, but I reached out to smaller influencers in the tech and gadget niche who were willing to collaborate for free products in exchange for reviews. This was a game changer. These influencers helped me reach audiences I wouldn't have been able to afford otherwise, and my sales began to soar. By the end of my second year in college, my side hustle had turned into a full-blown business. I was making more than enough money to pay for rent, buy groceries, and even treat myself to a few luxuries. I had achieved something I never thought possible: financial independence. But it wasn't just about the money. I had gained valuable experience in marketing, customer service, and e-commerce. I was learning on the job, and that was more fulfilling than any degree could ever be. At this point, I had a decision to make. I could either continue working part-time as a student and run my business on the side, or I could go all in and focus entirely on my business. The risk was daunting. My family didn't understand why I'd want to leave a safe career path for something uncertain. I had no guarantees. But after talking it through with some mentors and realizing that I was making more money than I ever could from a traditional job, I decided to take the leap. I quit my part-time jobs and committed myself fully to growing my business. Fast forward to today, and I'm running a thriving e-commerce business with multiple products in various niches. I'm still learning every day, but I've turned my side hustle into a sustainable and profitable company. I now have a small team of people who help with product sourcing, marketing, and customer service, and I spend my time working on strategic growth. The freedom I have today, both financially and personally, is something I couldn't have imagined just a few years ago. To anyone reading this, I want to say that entrepreneurship isn't a straight path. There are days when you'll feel like you're failing, days when you'll want to give up. But the key is to keep pushing forward, learn from your mistakes, and be willing to adapt. In the end, your success isn't determined by how quickly you succeed, but by how much you're willing to learn and persevere. Looking back, I'm proud of what I've accomplished, but I know the journey is far from over. The road to success isn't easy, but it's worth it if you're willing to put in the work. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. I was working a 9-to-5 job in marketing for a tech startup in downtown Toronto. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. I had a good routine. Wake up early, drink coffee, get to work by 8:30, slog through the day, and repeat. But after 3 years of this, I felt like something was missing. I wasn't passionate about my job, and I didn't have a lot of freedom. I wanted more. It all started when I came across an online course about e-commerce. I had always been interested in the idea of running an online business, but I didn't know where to begin. The course promised to teach you everything from setting up an online store to running ads and scaling your business. I thought, what's the worst that could happen? I'm already stuck in a job I don't love. I invested a couple $100s into the course, which was a big decision for me at the time. But something about it clicked. For the first time in a while, I felt excited. I had always been creative, and the idea of building something from scratch felt right. It was different from the routine I had gotten so tired of. I spent my nights after work watching the videos, learning about dropshipping, product research, and online marketing. I had no idea what I was doing at first, but I was determined. I learned about product niches, how to find suppliers, how to market on Instagram and Facebook, and everything in between. I even started spending my weekends working on the business, researching products, setting up a website, designing logos. At times, it felt like I was juggling a full-time job and a full-time passion project. But the idea of creating something that could change my life kept me going. A few months into my learning, I took the leap and launched my first online store. It was a basic website, selling a small collection of trendy accessories for pet owners. I was terrified. There were so many things I didn't know, and the risks felt enormous. What if I failed? What if I spent all this money and time for nothing? But there was no turning back. I didn't have a big marketing budget, so I started with organic traffic, posting on Instagram and using influencers in the pet space. At first, nothing happened. Days went by with no sales. I felt like I was just shouting into the void. But I didn't give up. I kept tweaking my product descriptions, improving the website design, and running small Facebook ads. After 2 weeks of trying, I finally made my first sale. It felt like a huge victory, even though it was just one sale. It showed me that this could work. The next day, I made 2 sales, then 5, and then things started to pick up. But scaling wasn't easy. I had to learn how to handle customer service, optimize my ads, manage inventory, and navigate the logistics of shipping. The pressure was intense, but I loved it. My income from my job wasn't enough to fully support myself, but my online store was slowly growing. Within 6 months, I was making a few $1,000s a month from the business while still working my 9-to-5 job. It was a grind, but I was making progress. I reached a point where I had to make a decision. My online store was growing faster than my day job, and it was taking up more of my time. But I was afraid to leave the stability of my paycheck. I had health benefits, retirement savings, and a secure job. The thought of leaving all of that behind terrified me. One night, after a particularly long day at work, I looked at my phone. My online store had just made $500 in a day. It was the most I had ever made in a single day from the store, and it was enough to cover my bills for a month. That's when I realized I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had created something that was viable, something I was truly passionate about. The next day, I handed in my resignation at my corporate job. My boss was shocked. "You're really leaving?" he asked, incredulously. "Yep," I said with a grin. I don't think he understood at the time. How could he? He didn't see the long nights, the constant grind, and the excitement I felt every time I checked my sales. At first, things didn't get any easier. Leaving my job meant more responsibility. I had to do everything: product sourcing, customer service, shipping, marketing, and taxes. I had to learn a lot of new things, and quickly. But what I lacked in experience, I made up for in drive. I watched countless YouTube videos, read articles, and joined online communities of other entrepreneurs. Slowly but surely, I started to master the different aspects of my business. A year after leaving my corporate job, I was making 6 figures annually. I had a team of 3 people who helped with customer service and fulfillment. I was finally able to focus full-time on my business, which was now growing at a faster rate than I had ever imagined. But success didn't come without its challenges. I had to deal with the constant pressure to stay ahead of competitors, manage cash flow, and ensure my business didn't plateau. There were months where my sales would dip, and I'd panic. But each time I figured out a solution, refined my marketing strategy, or launched a new product. Each time, I came out stronger. I also had to adapt to the ever-changing landscape of e-commerce. Social media algorithms changed, the cost of ads went up, and consumer behavior evolved. The business was always evolving, and I had to stay flexible. But that was one of the things I loved about it. No 2 days were the same. I was always learning, always adapting, and always growing. 2 years after I quit my job, my business had tripled in size, and I was now looking at expanding into new markets. I had more freedom than I ever imagined. I traveled when I wanted, spent time with family, and no longer had to follow the rigid schedules of a corporate job. But I also realized that the success I had was due to the sacrifices I made: sleepless nights, long hours, and stepping out of my comfort zone when I was scared. It wasn't easy, but I had done it. I had gone from a corporate job that drained me to running a business that gave me the freedom I always wanted. The hardest part was taking that first leap of faith, but now, looking back, it feels like one of the best decisions I've ever made. I always thought entrepreneurship was a myth, like the stuff of motivational speakers, Instagram influencers, and Silicon Valley legends. I was a 24-year-old college dropout working as a barista, living paycheck to paycheck, and struggling to make sense of what I was even doing with my life. But now, just 3 years later, I'm the proud founder of a multi-million-dollar business that started in my kitchen with just $100 and a lot of caffeine. Here's how it happened. In 2019, I was working at a Starbucks in downtown Los Angeles. I hated the job, hated the routine, and honestly hated being stuck in a cycle of minimum wage work with no clear path forward. My friends were starting to get real jobs with 401ks and health benefits, while I was stuck serving caramel macchiatos to people who probably made more in a day than I did in a week. One afternoon, a regular customer, an older gentleman in his 50s who always ordered the same thing, a tall black coffee, started chatting with me. He was a retired engineer who had spent most of his career working on large-scale projects. For whatever reason, we hit it off, and he started giving me some advice about life and business. "You know," he said, "I've always admired people who try to create something out of nothing. It's not easy, but it's the only way to escape the grind." At the time, I didn't think much of it, but that conversation lingered in my mind for weeks. Something about the idea of creating something that could stand on its own, something that didn't rely on a boss or a paycheck, appealed to me in a way I couldn't shake. Fast forward to the summer of 2020. The pandemic had forced everything to shut down. I was stuck at home, laid off from my barista job, and struggling to stay motivated. Every day felt the same, and I spent more time scrolling through Instagram than I care to admit. One day, I came across an ad for a work-from-home business opportunity. The ad was for a print-on-demand service that allowed people to create custom apparel without having to buy inventory up front. It sounded too good to be true, but something inside me said, what if? I didn't have much money to invest. I had about $100 to my name after paying rent, and I knew that if I was going to try this, I'd have to go all in. I spent the next few days researching print-on-demand services, looking up tutorials on YouTube, and learning about online marketing. It was overwhelming, but I was determined. I opened an account on Shopify, created a simple logo, and launched a store called Urban Threads. My first collection was based on minimalist designs, simple quotes, abstract art, and a few humorous phrases. Nothing groundbreaking, but I figured I'd start small. The first month was rough. I had zero sales. I was reading about other people who were making thousands of dollars a month with print on demand, but none of that seemed to be happening for me. I spent hours on Instagram and Facebook trying to promote my store, but the only people who visited were my friends and family. I wasn't ready to give up, though. I had put my last $100 into this, and there was no turning back. I kept tweaking the designs, improving the website, and learning more about how to market online. Slowly, things started to improve. I learned how to target Facebook ads more effectively and ran promotions to get people's attention. I began seeing my first sales, and although they were small, they felt like huge victories. It wasn't a lot, but I was making progress. By the fall of 2020, something clicked. I had been following influencers on Instagram who were into streetwear, and I noticed that they were constantly promoting their own clothing lines. I thought, what if I could partner with one of them? They have an audience that's already interested in what I'm doing. I didn't have the budget to pay for high-profile influencers, but I found a few smaller accounts with 10,000 to 50,000 followers who seemed to align with the vibe of Urban Threads. I reached out to them, offering to send them free gear in exchange for a post. To my surprise, one of them said yes. She posted a picture of herself wearing one of my shirts, and within 24 hours, I had made more sales than I had in the entire previous month. I reinvested every penny I made into more inventory and more influencer partnerships. This strategy became the key to scaling the business. As I partnered with more influencers, my brand gained traction. By mid-2021, Urban Threads had gone from a side project to a full-fledged business. I was making around $10,000 per month in revenue, and I had finally quit my part-time job to focus on it full-time. I hired a small team, just a couple of people to handle customer service and design, and expanded my product offerings to include hats, hoodies, and jackets. We also launched a new collection every season, keeping things fresh. But even with all the progress, I hit a plateau. I had learned a lot about marketing, but I still struggled with operations. Managing the logistics of printing, fulfillment, and shipping was becoming a nightmare. I was getting overwhelmed with customer complaints about delayed shipments and wrong sizes. I had to figure out a way to streamline the process. That's when I decided to bring in a co-founder, someone who was experienced in operations and supply chain management. I found an old college friend who had worked at a logistics company and had a lot of experience in e-commerce. Together, we created a better fulfillment system, which reduced our shipping times and improved the customer experience. I also started working on building a better brand identity, shifting from a cheap print-on-demand store to a high-quality, streetwear brand with a loyal following. By 2022, we were doing $1 million in annual revenue. I couldn't believe how far we'd come in just 2 years. Urban Threads wasn't just a business anymore, it was a community. We had a strong social media presence, loyal customers who wore our products proudly, and a growing team of people who believed in what we were doing. Today, in 2023, we're on track to do $10 million in revenue. I no longer worry about whether or not the business will succeed. Instead, I focus on scaling it, improving our products, and staying ahead of trends. I'm even exploring expanding into other areas of fashion, like sustainable clothing and accessories. It's still surreal to me that this all started with a $100 investment and a desperate desire to get out of my dead-end job. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that the road to success isn't always a straight line. There are setbacks, failures, and moments when you feel like giving up. But if you keep pushing and keep learning, the results can be life-changing. I'm living proof of that. I didn't start Urban Threads because I had a grand vision of building a multi-million-dollar company. I started it because I was tired of being stuck, tired of feeling like I wasn't in control of my own life. And now, 3 years later, I built something that I'm proud of. If I can do it, so can you. I've always believed that success is a mix of grit, timing, and a fair bit of luck. But looking back, I can say it's mostly about persistence. Here's how my journey started and how I built my company from the ground up. I graduated from college with a degree in business, and I had big dreams, as most of us do. I worked a couple of corporate jobs right out of school. To be honest, the work was tedious, and I always felt like I was just another cog in a massive machine. I wasn't passionate about what I was doing, and I knew I had to change something. But, like many people in their 20s, I had no idea where to start. One day, while sitting at my cubicle, staring at spreadsheets for the fifth hour in a row, I realized something. I wasn't building anything. I wasn't leaving my mark on the world. And I was tired of waiting for the right time or perfect opportunity to fall into my lap. So, I made the decision that I would try to start my own business. The problem? I had zero experience in entrepreneurship. I had never raised funds, never had to make a product, and certainly never faced the challenges of actually running a company. I had no clue where to even start, but that didn't stop me. If I was going to fail, I figured I might as well fail while doing something I actually cared about. I began researching online businesses, watching countless YouTube videos, reading blog posts, and listening to podcasts about entrepreneurs and their journeys. I found a niche that interested me: sustainable products. I had always been environmentally conscious, and the idea of creating products that were good for the planet and could make a difference excited me. The only problem was that I didn't have any money to get started, and I wasn't sure how to even make the products I envisioned. I spent months learning about sustainable materials, supply chains, and product development. I remember sitting in my small apartment with a notebook, writing down every idea, every connection I could think of. Slowly but surely, I made progress. I found a local supplier for biodegradable packaging, learned how to work with manufacturers overseas, and started sketching designs for a product that could be both eco-friendly and functional. The real breakthrough came when I realized I could launch my product on Kickstarter. Crowdfunding was something I hadn't thought about at first, but it turned out to be the perfect way to raise money without going into debt. So, I built my Kickstarter campaign, taking great care in designing every page and preparing the materials for the launch. I poured everything I had into it. Every free hour I had after work was dedicated to making sure the campaign would succeed. When I launched the campaign, I wasn't expecting a lot. My goal was to raise $10,000 to fund my first batch of products. I was nervous, checking my email every few minutes, hoping to see a notification that someone had backed my project. But after a week, nothing much had happened. My heart sank. I'd been working on this for months, and now it seemed like it was all for nothing. Then, on the 8th day, everything changed. My project was featured on Kickstarter's Projects We Love section. The next thing I knew, my project was gaining traction. Backers were pouring in, and the money started rolling in. By the end of the campaign, I had raised over $50,000. I remember sitting in front of my laptop, staring at the number. It was surreal. I had gone from a corporate drone to a first-time entrepreneur with real backing. I quickly realized that the real work was just beginning, though. Now I had to actually make the product and deliver it to everyone who had supported me. I worked relentlessly over the next few months, making sure every detail of the production process was perfect. The first shipment was a nightmare: delays, mistakes with packaging, miscommunications with manufacturers. But I learned quickly and made sure it didn't happen again. I was shipping out my first batch of products when I received my first big piece of advice from a seasoned entrepreneur. It was a message from a fellow business owner I had met through a networking event. He said, "You've made it. But now, you have to grow." Those words stuck with me. Growth is the hardest part of any business, and it was something I hadn't fully prepared for. After the initial excitement of launching, the reality of keeping customers happy and increasing sales hit me. I knew I needed to scale, but I had no idea how to do it without going broke. I invested every penny I made into marketing. I hired a small team to handle customer service, fulfillment, and social media. Slowly but surely, the business started to grow. I wasn't making a fortune yet, but I had built a small but loyal customer base. Then, 2 years into my venture, I got a call that would change everything. A large retailer had gotten wind of my product and wanted to stock it in their stores. They were impressed by the response my brand had gotten online and thought it would be a good fit for their customers. At first, I couldn't believe it. This was my big break. But I quickly realized that it wasn't going to be easy. The retailer wanted me to scale fast, much faster than I had anticipated. I had to find new suppliers, renegotiate terms, and find a way to produce at a much larger scale without compromising the quality of my product. It wasn't just about the product anymore. It was about logistics, managing inventory, and ensuring that everything ran smoothly behind the scenes. But after a lot of sleepless nights and negotiations, I was able to meet their requirements. My products hit the shelves in over 200 stores across the country. That was a pivotal moment for me. I went from a scrappy startup to a small business with national recognition. But even with all this success, I never lost sight of what had gotten me here in the first place: passion and persistence. Now, several years later, my company is a major player in the sustainable product space. I've expanded into other eco-friendly categories, and we've reached new international markets. But I'm still that same person who started with nothing but an idea and a laptop. Looking back, I can't help but think about the early days, the mistakes I made, and the challenges I overcame. I've learned that success doesn't come from being perfect. It comes from getting back up every time you fall down and refusing to quit. I'm still learning, still growing, and still working hard every day. But now, when I look at my company, I know that every sacrifice, every late night, and every failure has led me to where I am today. And that's something I'm incredibly proud of. I always thought success came with a grand idea, some crazy innovation that would blow people's minds and change the world. But I learned the hard way that sometimes success comes from simply spotting the right opportunity and relentlessly chasing it. This is my story about how I built a $1 million business from nothing. It all started in my sophomore year of college. I was studying marketing, constantly hustling through late nights of studying, and barely scraping by. I was living in a tiny apartment with a roommate who didn't really care about anything but his Xbox. I worked part-time at a local coffee shop, which barely paid for my rent and living expenses. But I had big dreams, dreams that didn't align with the life I was living. I wanted to be my own boss, build something that would not only provide for myself but also give me the freedom I craved. One afternoon, as I was scrolling through social media during my lunch break at work, I stumbled upon a post from a guy I knew in high school. He was promoting a new business venture, a dropshipping store selling custom t-shirts. Now, I had seen people trying this sort of thing before. I didn't think much of it at first. But as I scrolled further through his posts, I noticed something. His sales were growing fast. And it wasn't just him. There were other people I knew personally who had built successful e-commerce businesses that seemed to generate income with little effort. I started to think, maybe this was it. This could be my ticket out of this grind. The dropshipping model seemed straightforward. No need for inventory, no shipping logistics to worry about, and the ability to run the entire business from a laptop. It sounded too good to be true, but I figured there was no harm in giving it a shot. I had nothing to lose, really. I spent the next few weeks devouring online tutorials, reading blog posts, watching YouTube videos, and learning about Shopify, marketing strategies, and the intricacies of building an e-commerce store. My eyes were bloodshot from staring at the screen for hours on end, but I was determined. I finally built a basic website for my store, threaded treasures, and started importing products from suppliers in China. I set up a Facebook ad campaign with a budget of $5 a day and crossed my fingers. For the first few days, nothing happened. The ads didn't bring in any sales, and I started questioning whether I had made a huge mistake. But then, on day 4, I got my first sale. I couldn't believe it. My heart raced as I checked my email, and there it was, an order confirmation. I had made $18 from a single sale. It wasn't much, but it was proof that this could actually work. That small victory fueled my drive. I quickly started reinvesting the small profits back into ads, refining my campaigns, and making small tweaks to my website. I spent hours optimizing product descriptions, testing different ad copy, and experimenting with various marketing strategies. Slowly but surely, the sales began to trickle in. They weren't consistent at first, but I kept pushing forward. Then came the breakthrough. One night, I decided to test a new ad targeting a very specific niche: yoga enthusiasts. I found a unique t-shirt design with a catchy slogan that I thought would appeal to them. The next day, I woke up to a flood of notifications. I had made 15 sales overnight. That was the turning point. I knew I was onto something. From there, everything started to accelerate. I doubled down on Facebook ads and started experimenting with Instagram influencers. I reached out to fitness influencers who had smaller followings but seemed to engage with their audience regularly. They agreed to promote my shirts in exchange for free products. Some of these influencers posted my designs, and within hours, I started seeing a surge in traffic. My Shopify store's analytics were going wild, and sales were coming in faster than I could keep up. It wasn't long before I hit my first $10,000 in revenue. I couldn't believe it. At this point, I was still living in that tiny apartment, still working part-time at the coffee shop, but now I had a serious side hustle that was turning into something bigger than I could have imagined. I quit my job at the coffee shop and focused full-time on the business. By the end of that year, I hit $100,000 in revenue. I reinvested every penny back into the business. I hired my first employee to help with customer service, and I outsourced some of the design work. My brand was growing, and my products were starting to gain recognition. I wasn't just selling shirts anymore. I was building a brand. My team expanded, and I found myself surrounded by people who were as passionate as I was about making threaded treasures a success. Looking back now, it feels surreal. I went from a broke college student working part-time at a coffee shop to owning $1 million business. It wasn't easy. There were so many sleepless nights, doubts, and failures along the way. I almost gave up more times than I can count. But every failure taught me something. Every setback was a lesson, and I learned to adapt and grow. Now, we've expanded beyond just t-shirts. We've launched new product lines, including hoodies, mugs, and even accessories. We're generating multiple six figures in profit every year. And I can't help but feel grateful for that one decision to try something new. I didn't have a grand idea. I just had a willingness to learn and hustle. Success, it turns out, doesn't always come from inventing something new. Sometimes it's about spotting the right opportunity at the right time and giving it everything you've got. The best part? I now get to work from anywhere in the world. I travel when I want, and I've got a team of amazing people who help keep the business running smoothly. I've had the privilege of speaking at conferences and helping other aspiring entrepreneurs get started. It's been an incredible journey, one that I never could have predicted. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that the key to entrepreneurship isn't just about big ideas or lightning-fast success. It's about persistence, learning from failure, and staying adaptable. So, if you're reading this and thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple. Start small, learn constantly, and don't give up. You might just surprise yourself with what you're capable of. I used to be the kind of person who'd roll their eyes at all the hustle culture posts online, the ones about waking up at 5 a.m., grinding for 18 hours, and never stopping until you make it. I thought those people were all show and no substance. But that changed the moment I found myself completely broke, sitting in the middle of my apartment surrounded by stacks of debt and no real plan for the future. It wasn't always this way. A few years ago, I had a decent job working for a mid-sized marketing firm. I had a good salary, benefits, and a future that seemed secure. But I was always itching for something more. I wanted to build something that was mine. I didn't want to just be another cog in the machine. So, I began playing around with the idea of starting a business on the side. It started small, just some side projects after work, nothing too serious. I had a passion for fitness and nutrition, so I began creating workout plans and meal guides for a handful of friends who were also interested in getting into shape. They'd pay me a few $100 here and there, and for a while, I thought that was enough. But then I saw what was possible when people really went all in. One day, a friend of mine sent me a link to a business podcast featuring a guy who had turned a fitness brand into a multi-million-dollar empire. I was hooked. I spent the next few months listening to podcasts, reading books, and watching YouTube videos about business. I devoured content about how to build a brand, how to market it, and how to turn a passion into a profitable business. The more I learned, the more confident I became. I started creating more content for my fitness business, blog posts, Instagram videos, and workout tips. At first, it didn't really go anywhere. I was posting on social media like a madman, hoping for some traction. But the likes and comments were few and far between. It was discouraging. That's when I hit a wall. I had invested time, energy, and money into building this side business, and I was still barely breaking even. I had thousands of followers on Instagram, but none of them were buying anything. I couldn't figure out why my efforts weren't translating into sales. It felt like a slap in the face when I realized that my passion alone wasn't enough. I needed to understand the fundamentals of business, sales funnels, advertising, and scaling. I had no idea what I was doing, but I wasn't about to give up. I enrolled in online courses, hired a business coach, and started reaching out to mentors. Slowly, I began to see the gaps in my approach. I wasn't marketing the right way. I wasn't understanding my audience or their needs. I was creating content that I thought would work, but I didn't have a clear strategy. It was around this time that I decided to go all in. I quit my day job. I didn't have much in savings, and my side business was still far from profitable, but I had a fire in me that I couldn't ignore. I figured that if I didn't give it my all, I would never know if it could actually work. So, I jumped in with both feet. I'm not going to lie. The first few months were terrifying. I was living off a combination of credit cards, student loans, and whatever money I could scrape together. But I wasn't about to go back to my old job. I spent my days learning, applying new strategies, and testing my products. It was a grind. Some days, I would spend 12 hours straight on my laptop, tweaking my website, running ads, and figuring out how to position myself in the market. But then something clicked. One of my Instagram ads went viral. I woke up one morning to find hundreds of new followers, thousands of website visits, and dozens of messages asking for more information about my products. That one ad campaign turned everything around. I realized that the key to success wasn't just about creating great products. It was about reaching the right people, in the right way, at the right time. I kept scaling. I reinvested every penny I made into more ads, more content, and better products. I hired a small team to help with customer service and social media, and slowly but surely, the business began to grow. By the end of that year, I had replaced my full-time income. The next year, I tripled it. The hardest part, though, wasn't learning how to make money. It was dealing with the pressure of running a business. There were days when everything felt overwhelming. The stress of paying bills, managing employees, and making sure the business stayed afloat was tough. There were moments when I thought I might lose everything. I'll be honest, there were a few sleepless nights when I considered going back to a regular job just to escape the pressure. But the thing about entrepreneurship is that it's not just about money. It's about personal growth. I learned more about myself in those tough moments than I had in all the years prior. I learned how to manage my time, how to deal with failure, and how to be resilient. I learned that success isn't linear, and the path is rarely straight. But every time I faced a setback, I got back up and kept going. Eventually, I was able to hire more people, delegate tasks, and take some of the pressure off myself. I even began traveling, something I never would have done if I'd stayed at my old job. I finally had the freedom I had dreamed of when I was working late nights on my side business. It's been 5 years since I made the decision to quit my job and go all in on my business. It hasn't been easy, but it's been the most rewarding thing I've ever done. I now run a company with a team of 15, and we've expanded into multiple product lines, including apparel, supplements, and digital courses. My revenue is in the 7 figures, and we're still growing. Looking back, I often think about those early days, the long nights, the fear, the self-doubt. I think about how many times I almost gave up, but I didn't. I kept going, and it paid off in ways I could never have imagined. The one thing I wish I could have told my past self is this: it's going to be harder than you think, but it will be worth it. You'll have days when you feel like a failure, but those are the days that will teach you the most. Keep pushing, keep learning, and keep evolving. Success isn't about doing everything right. It's about keeping the faith when everything goes wrong. I'm not a millionaire by traditional standards, but I've built a life I'm proud of, and I have a business that continues to grow and provide for me and my team. I never could have imagined how much my life would change from taking that one leap of faith. But here I am, and I wouldn't change a thing. If you're sitting on the edge, thinking about starting your own business, here's my advice. Just start. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't wait until you have everything figured out. Start small, learn as you go, and keep moving forward. And when the inevitable challenges come, and they will, don't quit. If I can do it, you can too. The hardest part is taking the first step. After that, it's all about staying in the game. Keep learning, keep failing, and above all, keep going. Success will come, but only if you don't give up. In 2018, I was 28, living in a tiny apartment, drowning in student loans, and stuck in a dead-end job that barely paid the bills. I had spent years trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, but nothing seemed to stick. I bounced from job to job, tried to start side hustles that fizzled out, and felt like I was just going through the motions. I was overwhelmed by the thought of ever making it, and often wondered if I was just one of those people who would never get ahead. I had always been into fitness, and I spent a lot of my free time researching new workout routines, reading about health trends, and trying new supplements. But I never thought I could turn that passion into a business. That all changed when I randomly stumbled across a Reddit thread one night, which seemed to be about the growing market for wellness and fitness products. I'd always loved protein shakes, but I was frustrated with the lack of clean, natural options. The protein powders I found were filled with artificial sweeteners, low-quality ingredients, and added sugars. One night, I had a thought. What if I could make my own line of protein powders that actually tasted good, was healthy, and didn't use any of those weird chemicals. This thought lingered in my mind for a while, and the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. I didn't know the first thing about creating a supplement line, but I knew I had to start somewhere. I spent the next few weeks binge reading everything I could about the supplement industry. I learned about sourcing ingredients, working with manufacturers, and how to build a brand. The more I dug, the more I realized that the supplement industry was dominated by a few huge companies, but there were gaps in the market that I could exploit. I didn't have much money, but I was determined. I scraped together what little savings I had left after paying off bills and started with the basics: a name, a logo, and a rough product concept. I called my company Pure Gains. The name was simple, direct, and communicated exactly what I wanted to provide: pure, clean, high-quality supplements for people serious about their fitness goals. I spent the next few months reaching out to manufacturers and finding someone who would be willing to help me produce small batches of protein powder. I finally found a supplier who would work with me on a custom blend that used only natural ingredients. But the cost was high. To order a minimum run of 1,000 units, it would cost me over $5,000, a sum that seemed impossible for someone living paycheck to paycheck. I didn't give up. Instead, I started a pre-sale campaign on Instagram and Facebook. I posted about my idea, offering discounts to anyone who ordered in advance. I used my personal network and pushed hard on social media, sending DMs to anyone who would listen. I sold 100 units before I even had the product. That gave me the cash I needed to pay for the first batch, and I was able to place the order. In January 2019, the first batch of protein powder arrived. The label looked amateurish, and the product itself wasn't perfect, but I was ecstatic. I spent the next few weeks packing orders in my tiny apartment, boxing up protein powder while watching videos on YouTube about e-commerce marketing. I sent out samples to fitness influencers, bloggers, and anyone who might help get the word out. In the beginning, things were slow. I had a few sales here and there, but it wasn't anything close to the overnight success I'd hoped for. I was working full-time at a desk job, managing my business in my free time, and spending weekends at the gym to test out new flavors and improve the product. It was exhausting, but I believed in what I was doing. The breakthrough came when I finally hit on a marketing strategy that worked: Instagram giveaways. I reached out to influencers with followings of around 10,000 to 50,000, offering them free samples of Pure Gains in exchange for promoting the brand. The first giveaway I did brought in 500 new followers, and it also generated several sales. It wasn't a fortune, but it felt like the first real sign that this could work. The key to scaling, though, was learning how to manage my inventory in the business side of things. I didn't have much money to invest, but I spent every spare moment learning how to streamline my operations. I invested in better packaging, hired a part-time assistant to help with customer service, and kept refining my ads. By the summer of 2019, Pure Gains had crossed the $10,000 mark in monthly revenue. I was still working full-time, but I was starting to feel the pull to go all in. The business had gained enough momentum that I felt like I couldn't let it slip away. I made the decision to quit my job, move into a new apartment, and focus 100% on Pure Gains. From there, things started moving even faster. I started bringing in new products: vitamins, pre-workout supplements, and even fitness gear like gym bags and resistance bands. I rebranded with a more professional logo, and I hired a small team to help with fulfillment and marketing. I also started building partnerships with fitness trainers and local gyms, which helped raise awareness about the brand. By the end of 2020, Pure Gains was doing close to $250,000 in revenue, and I was finally able to pay off my student loans. The business wasn't huge, but it was profitable, and it was growing. I was starting to hire full-time employees, develop new products, and think about how to scale even further. In 2021, the big turning point came. I had built a small but loyal customer base, and I knew that if I could get the right products into the hands of the right people, we could blow up. I started investing heavily in paid ads: Facebook, Instagram, and Google. I knew I needed to build out our online presence if I wanted to take Pure Gains to the next level. With a little luck, a lot of hustle, and countless failures along the way, we grew to $2 million in annual revenue by the end of 2021. I moved into a bigger warehouse, hired a team of 15 people, and started looking for ways to expand into international markets. We're now on track to hit $5 million in revenue this year. Today, Pure Gains is a brand recognized by fitness enthusiasts worldwide. We've sold over 1 million units, and I've been able to build a business that supports my lifestyle and my goals. I'm no longer working out of my kitchen or packing orders in my apartment, but I remember those early days when it all started with just a dream, some protein powder, and a willingness to put in the work. If there's one thing I've learned along the way, it's that success isn't about being lucky. It's about being willing to keep going when everyone else has given up. I could have quit 100 times, but the only thing that kept me going was my belief in what I was doing. Today, I get to run a business that I'm proud of, and I'm grateful for every single step of the journey. It all started with just $100, a lot of late nights, and a dream that I refused to give up on. I used to be an average guy working a 9-to-5 job. I had the standard routine: wake up, go to work, grind through the day, come home, rinse, repeat. I thought that was just how life was. I never imagined I'd become an entrepreneur, let alone run a successful business. But the story I'm about to share is how I went from a desk job to building something that allowed me to quit my job and live life on my own terms. It all started when I was in my mid-20s. I was working at a tech support company. It was stable, but the pay was just enough to get by, and I didn't have the passion I thought I would in my early 20s. I had dreams of doing something bigger, but I had no idea what. My friends and I would often talk about ideas for side businesses, tech startups, online ventures, and even small service businesses, but nothing ever seemed to stick. That was until I stumbled upon an idea by accident. One Saturday, I was browsing Reddit, my usual weekend hobby, when I came across a thread about home gyms. A lot of people were talking about how difficult it was to find affordable, space-efficient gym equipment. Most of the equipment on the market was either too expensive or too bulky for people who didn't have a lot of space in their homes. The more I read, the more I realized that this was a problem that needed a solution. I knew I wasn't the only one who wanted to work out at home, but didn't have the room for huge machines or the budget for high-end gear. I started researching. I spent hours reading reviews, looking for customer pain points, and getting a feel for what the market looked like. I realized there was a massive gap in the market for high-quality, compact gym equipment at an affordable price. And that's when the idea hit me. Why not create a line of home gym products designed specifically for people who had limited space but still wanted to get a great workout? I had no idea how to make gym equipment, but I was determined to figure it out. I started small. I didn't have the funds to start with a full product line, so I decided to begin with something simple: a portable, foldable exercise bench. I researched manufacturing options, learned about the basics of product design, and found a factory in China that could help me get started. I designed a bench that was compact, sturdy, and easy to store, perfect for small apartments or homes with limited space. The first challenge was convincing people that my product was worth buying. I didn't have the budget for big marketing campaigns, so I turned to social media and online platforms to build awareness. I created a website and started posting on Reddit, Instagram, and Facebook groups related to home gyms. I used the platform's community features to engage directly with potential customers and get feedback on the idea. At first, the response was slow. But then, something unexpected happened. I received an email from a popular fitness influencer who had seen my product on Instagram. The influencer loved the idea of a foldable bench and wanted to feature it in one of their videos. That was the break I needed. The video went viral, and within days, my website was flooded with orders. It felt surreal. I had gone from being a guy stuck in a boring office job to running a business with real traction. But things weren't as easy as they seemed. As the orders started coming in, I had to figure out how to handle logistics, shipping, and customer service. I quickly realized that the biggest challenge wasn't the product itself, but managing the business side of things. I needed to scale fast, but I had no experience running a business. I had to learn everything from the ground up: how to hire people, how to manage inventory, how to set up efficient shipping systems. The learning curve was steep, but I was determined. I made plenty of mistakes along the way. The first big mistake I made was underestimating the importance of customer service. Early on, I didn't have a dedicated team for handling customer complaints, returns, and inquiries, and it caused a lot of frustration among my customers. I quickly learned that a smooth customer experience was just as important as the product itself. I hired a team, set up a customer service system, and made sure that every person who bought from me felt valued. Another issue I ran into was supply chain delays. At one point, my manufacturer ran into production issues, and it caused a significant delay in shipping. Customers were upset, and my reputation started to take a hit. I realized that communication was key. I made sure to update every customer about their order status, even if there wasn't much to report. Transparency went a long way in maintaining trust, and over time, my customers began to appreciate the honesty. By the time I hit my second year in business, I was finally starting to see the fruits of my labor. I had grown the company from a one-man operation into a small team. We expanded our product line to include other pieces of gym equipment, like adjustable dumbbells and resistance bands, and we were selling internationally. We had a strong social media presence, and our products were regularly featured in fitness blogs and magazines. Looking back, the hardest part of the whole journey wasn't designing the product or even getting customers to buy it. It was learning how to run a business. I had no formal education in business, no mentors to guide me, and no experience in entrepreneurship. I had to teach myself everything, from marketing to logistics, customer service to finance. And while it was challenging, it was also incredibly rewarding. There were times when I wanted to give up. There were moments when I thought about going back to my old job, where everything was comfortable and predictable. But then I'd look at the growth I had achieved, the impact I was making on my customers, and the freedom I was gaining from not being tied to an office desk every day. It kept me going. Fast forward to today, and I'm proud to say that my business is thriving. I've expanded into new markets, and we now have a team of 20-plus employees working with me. My products are sold in major retail stores, and we've even partnered with gyms to offer branded equipment. What started as a small side project in my apartment has grown into a company that supports me and my team financially and allows me to live life on my own terms. Looking back, I still can't believe how far I've come. It all started with a simple idea I had while scrolling through Reddit. If you had told me 5 years ago that I would be running a successful business, I would have laughed. But now, I'm living proof that sometimes the best opportunities come from the most unexpected places. If there's one thing I've learned from this experience, it's that you don't have to have everything figured out from the start. You don't need a business degree or a ton of money. You just need a willingness to learn, the perseverance to keep going when things get tough, and the courage to take the leap. The journey won't always be easy, but if you stick with it, the rewards can be more than worth it. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. I was 27 when I first realized I had to take the leap into entrepreneurship. It wasn't some grand revelation, but rather a slow burn that built up over time. I had been working a steady job in marketing at a mid-sized firm, doing the usual grind. I'd worked my way up from an entry-level position, and while the salary was decent, something was missing. I felt trapped in the corporate maze, shackled by the routines of the office, the endless meetings, and the hierarchy that constantly seemed to stifle any creative ideas I had. My manager, a guy who didn't really have any true leadership skills, kept pushing for results that didn't align with my values. The company's direction was all about short-term wins and pushing products that weren't really aligned with consumer needs. I knew that I was capable of more than just pushing numbers and following orders. One day, I was sitting at my desk staring at an email about a new project that I was supposed to spearhead. It was the same routine, another initiative that I didn't believe in, but I had to sell it like I did every other product. I was exhausted. There was a part of me that wanted to scream at the sheer futility of it all. It wasn't about the work. It was about the fact that I wasn't passionate about it anymore. So, I started quietly planning my exit. It wasn't like I hated the job, but I realized that I was capable of doing something more meaningful. I had always been interested in e-commerce, particularly the potential of selling products online. I had seen how people had created successful businesses with nothing more than a website and a bit of hustle. That's what I wanted to do. Create something of my own, something that I could put my heart into. The first idea that came to me was simple, a small online store that sold eco-friendly products. At first, it was just a hobby. I didn't have any grand expectations for it. I just wanted to see if I could make a small side income doing something that felt more aligned with my values. After work, I'd spend a few hours researching, reading up on digital marketing, finding suppliers, and looking into platforms like Shopify and Etsy. It was a slow start. I spent countless hours just learning the ropes. I didn't have a mentor or any specific guidance, but I was determined to figure it out. The first few months were discouraging. I got barely any traffic, and the few sales I made were from friends and family who were supporting my little project. I wasn't making any money to speak of, but I wasn't willing to give up either. I worked on it every chance I got, refining the website, improving my social media presence, and slowly expanding my product line. I started seeing a little more interest. A few people I didn't know bought from me. It wasn't much, but it felt like a sign that I was onto something. But it wasn't until I got the idea to create a subscription box that things started to take off. I was browsing through Instagram one evening when I stumbled across a subscription box business. It was like a light bulb went off in my head. The concept of a recurring delivery of products appealed to me, and I thought about how I could apply it to the eco-friendly products I was already selling. I spent weeks refining the idea. The subscription box would feature a curated selection of eco-friendly items that were practical, useful, and beautifully designed. I could partner with small businesses that shared my values, and customers could get a new, exciting box of products every month. I was excited, but also terrified. There were so many moving pieces to figure out: packaging, logistics, branding, pricing. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized this was the step that could finally push my business to the next level. So, I went for it. I created a new website to feature the subscription box, built a brand around it, and launched it with a special offer for the first 100 subscribers. The first month was a struggle, as I tried to figure out the best way to fulfill orders and market the service. But by month 2, I had gained a little traction, and by month 3, the momentum started to build. There were still plenty of challenges. The first few months of subscription boxes were an absolute logistical nightmare. There were shipping delays, inventory issues, and I had way too many late nights trying to sort everything out. My work-life balance was non-existent, and there were moments when I thought about quitting. The stress was overwhelming, and I was constantly second-guessing myself. But the support from my customers kept me going. They loved the product, and their feedback was encouraging. Slowly, my customer base grew, and I was able to reinvest my profits into improving the service. I hired a few part-time employees to help with packaging and customer service, and slowly but surely, things started to feel more sustainable. About 6 months into the new venture, I hit my first major milestone. I made more money from my subscription box business than I had ever earned in my day job. It was surreal. I could see that there was potential for growth, and the dream of becoming a full-time entrepreneur was no longer just a fantasy. I handed in my resignation at my marketing job, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my future. The months that followed were a blur of growth, challenges, and moments of doubt. But I pushed through it, and the business grew faster than I ever expected. By the end of my first year as a full-time entrepreneur, my subscription box business had grown to the point where it was generating consistent revenue. I had created a brand that resonated with people, and my customer base was loyal and growing. I was able to expand the product range, offer new types of boxes, and even collaborate with influencers in the eco-friendly space. I look back now, and it feels like a different lifetime. From that frustrated employee sitting in a cubicle to the founder of a thriving business, the journey was anything but easy. It took long nights, sacrifice, and a lot of self-doubt, but I finally realized that success doesn't come from following a traditional path. It comes from creating your own. Now, I'm able to work from anywhere, set my own schedule, and truly feel like I'm making a difference with my business. I'm not just selling products. I'm offering something meaningful, something that aligns with my values. Every day is a challenge, but it's a challenge I'm excited to face. Looking back, I wouldn't change a thing. Every mistake, every setback, and every failure led me to where I am today. Entrepreneurship is a wild ride, but it's one I wouldn't trade for anything. It was a cold January morning in 2018 when I made the decision that would change my life. I was sitting in my cramped, rented apartment in Brooklyn, staring at a laptop screen, refreshing job boards for the 200th time that week. My previous job as a marketing assistant had just ended, and the fear of unemployment was gnawing at me. I had worked in corporate for years, and no matter how much I hated it, I couldn't seem to escape. But that morning, something inside me clicked. I knew I couldn't keep going through the motions. I needed to make my own way. I wasn't rich. Hell, I wasn't even remotely close to it. I had a decent savings account, but it was enough to last me for a few months, maybe 6 at best. But I had something else, a burning desire to create, to build something from nothing. It wasn't about money at that moment. It was about the feeling of control, the satisfaction of seeing an idea come to life. My journey started with a simple idea that seemed ridiculously small at the time: custom-printed t-shirts. At first glance, it felt like every other person was doing it. I had seen countless entrepreneurs on Instagram selling their own branded apparel. But I thought, what if I could add something that others were missing? I wasn't sure what that something was yet, but I knew I had to figure it out. I spent the next few weeks researching the t-shirt industry, everything from printing methods to marketing strategies. I spent hours watching YouTube videos and reading blogs. In the process, I learned about direct-to-garment (DEG) printing, a method that allowed for high-quality prints on t-shirts without the need for inventory. I knew this was a game-changer for me because I didn't have any capital to invest in bulk products up front. The next step was securing a website. I spent my last $200 on a Shopify subscription, domain name, and a simple template. The website looked amateur, but it was mine. I named the store Threaded Dreams. It was cheesy, sure, but I liked it. My plan was to focus on custom designs that reflected the culture of young professionals: smart, witty, and unique. Something that felt personal. I started designing my own t-shirts on Photoshop. Most of them were minimalistic, with a few motivational quotes and abstract graphics. I uploaded the designs to my site and nervously clicked the launch button. The first few days were quiet. I didn't expect much, but I was anxious. Each time I refreshed the website, hoping to see some sign of life, my heart would race. But no sales came. For the first 2 weeks, I didn't sell a single shirt. My friends and family tried to encourage me, but I could see the doubt in their eyes. They were all waiting for me to fail. I was ready to give up. I had spent my savings, and I had nothing to show for it. But then I had an idea. Why not focus on my own city first? Brooklyn was full of people who were into fashion, into the hustle, into the grind. What if I could create a collection inspired by the borough itself? I spent hours walking around the streets of Brooklyn, taking photos, gathering inspiration from the graffiti, the architecture, and the people. I took that raw energy and channeled it into my designs. The next collection was gritty, urban, and unapologetically bold. The designs felt authentic, like they belonged in the neighborhood. I launched the Brooklyn-inspired collection, and this time, something clicked. People began to take notice. The local community resonated with the designs, and my social media following slowly grew. I used Instagram and Facebook ads, targeting people who lived in Brooklyn or had an interest in the area. I was still only selling a few shirts a week, but I felt like I was finally on the right track. Then came my breakthrough moment. One day, I got an email from a local fashion blogger in Brooklyn who wanted to feature my brand on her blog. I was shocked. I hadn't even heard of her before, but she had a decent following, and she loved the idea behind my brand. She posted a review, and within 24 hours, my sales doubled. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep me going. I reinvested every penny back into the business. I improved my website, hired a graphic designer to help with future collections, and began building partnerships with influencers in the Brooklyn fashion scene. Slowly but surely, I started gaining traction. I expanded my designs to include accessories like hats and tote bags. I also started offering limited edition drops, something I had learned was a powerful sales tactic in the fashion world. By the end of 2018, I had built a small but growing business. I wasn't getting rich, but I was making a living. More importantly, I was finally doing something that made me feel alive. The fear of failure still haunted me, but it wasn't as overwhelming as it had been before. I had discovered the power of persistence, creativity, and community. Fast forward to 2020. The pandemic hit, and like so many others, I had to pivot. The in-person sales and events I had planned all came to a halt. But I didn't give up. Instead, I leaned into the online community even more, launching a new line of work-from-home gear. The designs were clever, funny, and comforting, exactly what people needed during the uncertain times. I doubled down on digital marketing and began offering promotions for frontline workers, donating part of my proceeds to charity. That was when the magic happened. As the world adjusted to a new normal, Threaded Dreams became more than just a clothing brand. It became a symbol of resilience. People bought my shirts not just because they liked them, but because they felt a connection to the brand. The community I had built was not just a customer base. It was a group of people who shared the same struggles, dreams, and hopes. By the time 2021 rolled around, I had scaled the business into something sustainable. I hired a small team, expanded into new cities, and even launched a pop-up shop in downtown Brooklyn. I was finally able to quit my day job and focus on Threaded Dreams full-time. It wasn't easy. There were many sleepless nights, doubts, and moments when I wanted to quit. But I had learned one thing above all: success doesn't come from the desire to make money. It comes from the passion to create something meaningful and the persistence to keep going when everything seems impossible. Today, Threaded Dreams is a thriving brand. We've expanded our product lines, worked with well-known influencers, and even had our first celebrity endorsement. But for me, the biggest success isn't the money or the recognition. It's the message we've been able to share. You can build something from nothing if you're willing to take risks, put in the work, and, most importantly, never give up. In 2017, I was 26 years old, living in a small apartment with a roommate I barely spoke to, working a dead-end job as a junior marketing analyst. I had no real direction and no savings to speak of. The student loans were piling up, and every month felt like a struggle to make ends meet. It felt like I was living the same day over and over, working to pay bills, getting through the week, and waiting for the weekend to roll around, just to rinse and repeat. I had always been the entrepreneurial type. When I was a kid, I would sell homemade lemonade or snacks to my neighbors, and in high school, I tried to start a couple of small online businesses, but nothing ever really worked. I didn't have the right knowledge, nor did I have the patience. I was always chasing the quick win. Fast forward to 2017, and I was fed up. I had watched people build online businesses from nothing, and part of me was just plain jealous. But I was too scared to take a leap. The fear of failing kept me trapped in a comfortable, but uninspiring, job. That all changed in early 2018 when I was scrolling through Instagram and came across a post about starting a dropshipping business. The post was from some guy who had apparently built a six-figure business in a matter of months. I thought, if he can do it, why can't I? I had no idea what dropshipping was, but the idea that I could run a business from my laptop without having to buy inventory up front sounded like exactly what I needed. So, I spent the next few weeks watching hours of YouTube videos, reading blogs, and joining Facebook groups where people were discussing e-commerce. I learned about Shopify, AliExpress, Facebook ads, and how to find products that people were likely to buy. After a couple of weeks of research, I felt like I had enough information to get started. But there was one problem: I had no money to invest in inventory or ads. All I had was $200. I started by looking for a product that was cheap enough for me to afford, but still had the potential for a decent profit margin. I landed on phone cases. They were cheap to source, lightweight for shipping, and I could sell them for a nice markup. I found a supplier on AliExpress who could send them directly to my customers, and I launched my Shopify store with a basic, free theme. I didn't know anything about design, so the store was pretty ugly, but I was too impatient to perfect it. I put together a few product descriptions, set up a Facebook ad campaign targeting people who had recently bought a new phone, and crossed my fingers. I had no expectations. My main goal was just to make my first sale. Days passed, and I got nothing. No clicks, no sales, just a handful of visitors that bounced immediately after seeing the site. I was crushed. I thought it was all a scam. But instead of giving up, I decided to make some changes. I spent more time on the website, made it look more professional, and tweaked my ads. I also started targeting more specific audiences: phone enthusiasts, tech geeks, and people who loved customizing their devices. After about a week of tweaking and testing, I made my first sale. It was a $15 profit, but to me, it felt like I had just hit the jackpot. That sale was the moment I knew that this could work. I immediately started scaling my ads and invested the $15 profit back into the business. Slowly but surely, sales started trickling in. By the end of the month, I had made $500 in revenue, and I was ecstatic. I had no idea that I had just stumbled upon something that would completely change my life. But then, I hit a wall. As my store grew, so did the problems. Customer service inquiries piled up, orders got delayed, and returns started flooding in. I didn't have a clear process for handling these issues, and it felt like I was constantly putting out fires. I was working 18-hour days, doing everything from managing ads to handling customer service, and it was exhausting. I started to doubt whether this was something I could actually do long-term. But instead of quitting, I turned to the one thing I had learned over the years: research. I dug deeper into e-commerce communities and learned how successful entrepreneurs were scaling their businesses. I started outsourcing tasks I wasn't good at, like customer service, and I hired a virtual assistant to handle the basics. I also switched suppliers to a more reliable one and negotiated better shipping times. With each step, my business became smoother, more efficient, and more profitable. By the summer of 2018, I was making $10,000 a month in revenue. I had quit my job and was working on my business full-time. It felt surreal. For the first time in my life, I was financially stable and doing something I loved. But I knew this was just the beginning. I was hungry for more. So, I reinvested everything I made into more inventory, more ads, and better tools to automate the business. I also expanded my product line. I added accessories like wireless chargers, screen protectors, and phone stands. By the end of 2019, my store had grown to $250,000 in annual revenue. I had hired a team of 3 people, including a full-time customer service rep, an ads manager, and a content creator. I was able to focus on the bigger picture, creating a brand and building a customer base that trusted my products. I was no longer just a dropshipping store. I had created a legitimate brand in the tech accessories niche. But the next big hurdle came in 2020. The pandemic hit, and shipping delays, product shortages, and an influx of new online sellers made it harder to maintain my edge. The market became saturated, and competition increased. I realized I needed to differentiate myself further, so I shifted my strategy. I introduced a subscription box model for phone accessories, which helped to create recurring revenue. I also started collaborating with influencers on Instagram and YouTube to build my brand's credibility. That strategy paid off big time. By 2021, my business was generating $2 million in revenue. I had expanded into international markets and launched a premium line of eco-friendly accessories. The business was growing faster than I could keep up, but I had a great team behind me, and I had learned how to delegate and trust others with key tasks. Now, in 2023, I'm proud to say that my business is bringing in over $5 million in revenue annually. I have a team of 25 employees, and we've expanded our product range to include everything from tech gadgets to lifestyle products. We've built a loyal customer base, and I'm consistently reinvesting in new products and marketing strategies. Looking back, it's hard to believe how far I've come. I started with nothing $200, a basic website, and a whole lot of uncertainty. But the key was persistence. I failed countless times, but I never gave up. I just kept learning, adjusting, and pushing forward. If there's one thing I can tell anyone thinking about starting their own business, it's this: the road is tough, but the rewards are worth it. It's easy to get discouraged when things aren't working, but the ones who succeed are the ones who refuse to quit. I didn't have any special skills or advantages when I started. I just had a burning desire to make something work, and I wasn't willing to stop until it did. And now, here I am, living the dream I thought was impossible. The rise of a green entrepreneur. From scraps to success. In the summer of 2017, I was living paycheck to paycheck, barely scraping by in a small apartment in the outskirts of a bustling city. I had just turned 26, and the weight of the world felt like it was constantly pressing down on me. I had no savings, no backup plan, and absolutely no idea what I wanted to do with my life. The corporate job I held at a mid-tier marketing firm was draining, and every morning, the thought of going into work made me feel like I was drowning. But everything changed one evening when I found a crumpled flyer in my mailbox about a local green business startup competition. I was instantly intrigued. The flyer promised seed money for the best business idea that focused on sustainability and helping the environment. I had always cared about the planet, but had never really thought of making a living off of it. It seemed like a long shot, but at that point in my life, I was desperate for something that could pull me out of the monotony I was living. I figured, why not give it a try? So, I decided to go for it. I spent the next few weeks researching the concept of sustainable business, from upcycling to eco-friendly products, and even alternative energy sources. Nothing really spoke to me until I found an article about how much waste is generated by single-use plastics, particularly in the food industry. That article ignited something inside me. I had always hated how much plastic we used in everyday life, but I had never considered the sheer scale of it. After a few sleepless nights of research and brainstorming, I came up with the idea for my business, creating reusable food storage solutions made from sustainable materials. I wanted to focus on offering alternatives to plastic wrap, plastic sandwich bags, and other single-use items that dominate kitchens. I was obsessed with the idea that if I could provide people with eco-friendly alternatives that were just as convenient as the plastic ones, they might actually change their habits and make a difference. I crafted my proposal, put together a rough business plan, and entered the competition with little expectation of winning. Honestly, I didn't think I stood a chance against the other participants, who were already running businesses or had advanced degrees in environmental science. But I was passionate, and I could speak to the urgency of the environmental crisis. I remember walking into the competition presentation day feeling both nervous and excited, unsure of how my idea would be received. When it was my turn to pitch, I was sweating bullets. But as I began to talk about my vision of creating a line of reusable beeswax wraps, cloth bags, and silicone food covers, I noticed that the room grew silent. I spoke with conviction about how small, everyday changes could add up to a massive collective impact. I explained how my products would not only be eco-friendly but also practical, affordable, and stylish enough to appeal to a wide range of consumers. After my presentation, there was a moment of quiet. The judges huddled together for a few minutes, and then, to my absolute shock, they announced that I had won the competition. I could hardly believe it. They gave me $10,000 in seed money, free access to a network of mentors, and guidance to get my idea off the ground. My dream had just begun. I spent the next few months doing everything I could to bring my vision to life. I found a manufacturer that specialized in eco-friendly products, sourced sustainable materials, and created my first prototypes. I then launched a crowdfunding campaign to raise additional capital. The response was overwhelming. People were not only excited about the environmental impact of my products, but also impressed with how easy it was to incorporate them into their daily lives. I reached my funding goal in just a week, and by the end of the month, I had pre-sold over 1,000 units of my reusable food wraps. With the funds from the crowdfunding campaign, I expanded my product line to include reusable coffee cup sleeves, silicone snack bags, and even biodegradable cleaning cloths. My business grew quickly, and as sales increased, I was able to hire a small team to help with production, marketing, and logistics. It felt like everything was happening so fast, and I was constantly learning on the go. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. As my business grew, so did the challenges. I had to deal with inventory issues, shipping delays, and, of course, competition. There were months when sales would dip, and I worried if I could keep the business afloat. I felt the weight of responsibility on my shoulders as I struggled to balance the growing demands of my company with my personal life. There were days when I would work 16-hour shifts, only to wake up and do it all over again. The breakthrough came in 2019 when a major eco-conscious influencer on Instagram shared one of my products in a post. Sales skyrocketed. Suddenly, my brand was being seen by thousands of people, and the orders came pouring in. I couldn't keep up with demand, but that surge in exposure allowed me to scale my business even further. I reinvested every penny I made back into the company, expanding my product offerings and improving my website. I started to secure partnerships with larger retailers who were beginning to see the growing demand for sustainable alternatives. By 2020, I was finally able to quit my marketing job and focus on my business full-time. It felt surreal, but at the same time, I had worked so hard for this moment. The sleepless nights, the stress, and the constant hustle had all paid off. My brand had grown from a small side project to a full-fledged business with multiple employees, a thriving online store, and a loyal customer base. But the journey wasn't just about financial success. It was about making a difference. Every time I received a message from a customer thanking me for providing them with sustainable products that helped reduce their plastic consumption, I was reminded of why I started in the first place. It wasn't just about building a business. It was about creating something that would leave a positive legacy for the planet. Looking back, I never imagined that the idea born from a crumpled flyer in my mailbox would lead to this level of success. There were countless moments of doubt, failure, and fear along the way. But my determination to make a difference, my love for sustainability, and my willingness to take risks allowed me to turn my passion into a thriving business. And now, for years later, I've expanded to international markets, collaborated with other eco-conscious brands, and, most importantly, I've helped reduce the consumption of millions of single-use plastic items. Entrepreneurship isn't easy, and it's not always glamorous. It's a constant cycle of ups and downs, and sometimes it feels like you're barely holding on. But if you find something you're passionate about, something that gives you purpose, the hard work will always be worth it. So, to anyone out there with an idea, no matter how small it seems, take the leap. You might just surprise yourself. It was the fall of 2017 when I found myself sitting at a coffee shop in downtown Seattle, trying to make sense of my life. At 28, I was freshly out of a failed startup and already feeling the weight of that failure on my shoulders. I had given it everything: time, money, energy, but in the end, it crumbled. I was broke, emotionally exhausted, and honestly, I had no idea what I was doing next. But here I was, nursing a cold cup of coffee and flipping through an old notebook. It was a notebook that had been with me through some of my darkest times, a journal I had used when I was first dreaming up that doomed startup. I kept scribbling ideas, and they were mostly half-thought-out, disjointed ramblings. But that day, something clicked. I started to write a business idea that felt completely different from anything I had tried before. Instead of jumping into tech with a big vision for the future, I decided I would focus on something simple, something that would solve a problem I had faced time and time again. I wanted to make a product that people could trust, something they could rely on without the frills. Something straightforward. It was a water bottle, but not just any water bottle. This one would be made from stainless steel, feature a unique design, and be vacuum insulated. I wasn't inventing the wheel, but I felt like there was an opportunity to create something that would stand out in a crowded market. I had spent years going through different water bottles, each one breaking down, losing its insulation, or leaking. I wanted to make the perfect one, and I had a feeling there were others out there who would appreciate that. The problem? I had no capital. I had maxed out my credit cards on the failed startup, and my savings were a distant memory. I couldn't afford manufacturing costs, design fees, or any of the other costs associated with starting a business. But the idea wouldn't leave me alone. For the next couple of months, I started to research everything I could about product design, supply chains, and crowdfunding. I spent countless hours on forums, reading about how people had launched successful businesses with little to no money. The most common advice was to go the crowdfunding route. Use Kickstarter or Indiegogo to raise the initial funds. It was a long shot, but it seemed like the only chance I had. I created a business plan, which wasn't much more than a few pages of thoughts and sketches. I designed the first prototype of the bottle, sketching it out by hand, and then I found a manufacturer overseas who could create it for me. The first quote they gave me was $30 per unit, and I realized immediately that I would need a significant amount of funding to get started. But I didn't give up. I knew that if I didn't try, I would regret it for the rest of my life. I took out a small loan from a friend, and with that, I was able to create the first batch of prototypes. I worked day and night on the Kickstarter campaign, writing copy, taking photos, and crafting a video. The video was rough, just me talking about my idea and showing off the bottle prototype, but it felt real. It felt authentic. The launch date was set, and I was a nervous wreck. The goal was $20,000, far more than I had ever hoped to raise, but it was what I thought I would need to get the project off the ground. When the campaign went live, I waited, and then, slowly, the backers started coming in. It was slow at first, just a trickle of pledges here and there. I had a few friends and family members who supported me, but it was nothing like I had imagined. But something interesting happened about halfway through the campaign. Word started to spread. People were sharing my campaign on social media, and it started gaining momentum. I had built a small but passionate community around the product, and they were helping to spread the word. By the end of the campaign, we had raised $65,000, 3 times the original goal. I was shocked, thrilled, but also terrified. I now had to deliver on my promises. I spent the next several months working with manufacturers to finalize the design, make the changes to the product based on feedback, and figure out the logistics of getting everything shipped out. It was a nightmare. I remember the first shipment of bottles arriving at my apartment. It was a stack of cardboard boxes in my living room, and it felt surreal. I had no idea what I was doing. There were issues with packaging, shipping delays, and of course, some of the bottles had quality issues that had to be dealt with. But I didn't quit. I spent weeks responding to customer emails, dealing with returns, and tweaking the product. But with each step forward, I felt more confident. The feedback I was getting was mostly positive, and people were starting to recognize the brand. Eventually, I was able to get a small office and hire my first employee, a marketing specialist who helped me expand the brand's reach. We launched more products, improved the original design, and continued to build on the momentum from the Kickstarter campaign. Looking back, I realized that the success didn't come overnight. It wasn't a smooth ride. There were countless times when I doubted myself, when I thought I had made the biggest mistake of my life. But each time, I took one more step forward. Today, my company is a multi-million-dollar business. We've expanded into other products, water bottles, thermoses, and travel mugs, and we've developed a loyal customer base who trust our brand. We have partnerships with major retailers, and we've even expanded into international markets. I still think back to that day in 2017 when I was sitting in the coffee shop, feeling defeated and lost. If someone had told me then that I would be where I am today, I wouldn't have believed it. But I took a chance. I took a risk when everything felt uncertain, and it paid off. My advice to anyone starting out: don't let fear paralyze you. It's easy to get caught up in doubt, especially after a failure. But sometimes, the best thing you can do is just take one small step forward, even when you don't know where it will lead. Every successful business is built on a foundation of failures and mistakes. But it's through those experiences that you learn, grow, and ultimately succeed. I never thought a simple water bottle would be the thing that changed my life. But here I am, looking back on the journey, and I can honestly say that the failure of my first startup was the best thing that ever happened to me. I was 28 years old, working a 9-to-5 job in a corporate office, feeling like I was slowly drowning in a life that wasn't mine. I had always dreamed of owning my own business, but the idea of actually doing it seemed like a distant fantasy. I didn't have any entrepreneurial experience, no significant savings, and I didn't exactly come from a wealthy family. But I had something that mattered more: ambition. And with ambition, you can figure out the rest. It all started when I took a vacation to a small coastal town on the outskirts of the city. The place was beautiful, quiet, and incredibly peaceful. I stumbled across a tiny cafe by the beach, a place that had clearly been open for years but was just beginning to show its age. The walls were filled with old photographs of the owners, stories of how they had built the cafe from the ground up. I found myself sitting there for hours, sipping coffee and reading a book, just watching the locals come in and out. Something about the place, the ambience, the way it was run, left me with a feeling I couldn't shake. It felt like the kind of place I would want to own someday. On my way out, I struck up a conversation with the cafe owner, an older woman named Clara. I asked her about the business, how she had built it up over the years, and if she had any advice for someone like me, someone who dreamed of one day owning a small business. She smiled, leaned in, and told me something I'll never forget. It's not about the money or the timing. It's about the people. If you create a place where people feel like they belong, everything else will fall into place. That conversation stuck with me. The next day, as I sat in the cramped, beige cubicle I'd been working in for years, I couldn't stop thinking about Claire's words. I had no idea how to start, but I knew one thing for sure. I didn't want to keep sitting in a cubicle. I wanted to build something real. I spent the next few months researching everything I could about starting a business. I watched countless YouTube videos, read articles, and joined online forums. I started talking to people who had small businesses, asking them about their experiences. It wasn't easy. Most people were either too busy to talk or hesitant to share their secrets. But I didn't let that discourage me. I knew it was going to be hard, and that was part of the challenge. By the time I was ready to make my move, I had saved up a little money from my job, enough to cover initial expenses for what I had in mind: an online retail store. I figured it would be a low-risk start, and if things didn't work out, I could always go back to my desk job. So, I pulled the trigger. I quit my job, rented a small office space, and began sourcing products to sell online. At first, things were slow. I didn't have a big social media following, and the website I built on my own was nowhere near as professional as I wanted it to be. I made every mistake you could imagine. I spent way too much money on inventory that didn't sell, made shipping errors, and lost track of customer orders. There were nights when I'd stay up until 3 a.m. working on the website, only to have everything crash the next day. It felt like I was hitting a wall at every turn. But I wasn't giving up. After months of struggle, I decided to take a different approach. I took Clara's advice to heart and started focusing on creating a brand, not just a product. I began posting personal stories on social media, sharing my struggles and successes, and slowly building a connection with my audience. I also started offering better customer service, responding to inquiries promptly, and going above and beyond to ensure that every customer had a positive experience. Things didn't turn around overnight, but slowly, I began to see results. Sales started picking up, and people started talking about my brand. I felt like I was finally on the right path. By year 2, I was able to hire a small team, including a marketing expert and a customer service manager. I was still doing a lot of the work myself, but now I had a team that was just as passionate about the business as I was. As the years went by, the business continued to grow. I expanded into new product categories, built partnerships with other small businesses, and even started doing pop-up shops in different cities. The journey was far from easy, but it was incredibly rewarding. I started to feel like I had finally found my calling. One of the most pivotal moments came when I decided to invest in a physical store. It was a huge risk, and I wasn't sure if it would pay off, but I wanted to create a place where people could come in, experience the brand in person, and feel connected to the business in a way that an online store just couldn't provide. The first few months were nerve-wracking. We had very few customers, and I questioned whether I had made a huge mistake. But then, slowly, people started coming in. Word of mouth spread, and soon we were getting regulars. The store became a gathering place for people who shared our values, those who cared about quality, community, and supporting small businesses. Looking back, I can't believe how far we've come. What started as an online shop in a tiny office is now a thriving business with multiple locations and a dedicated customer base. We've had our ups and downs, and there have been times when I seriously considered throwing in the towel. But each challenge taught me something new, and each setback was an opportunity to grow. I've learned more than I ever thought possible about business, about people, and about myself. I'm not going to lie and say everything is perfect now. Running a business is still hard work, and there are days when I wonder if it's all worth it. But then I remember the words of Clara, and I remember the feeling I had when I first started this journey. It's about creating something that matters, something that people value. And in the end, that's what keeps me going. If you're thinking about starting your own business, my advice to you is this: don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't wait for the right amount of money or the perfect business plan. Start where you are, with what you have, and just keep going. The road won't be easy, but if you're willing to work hard, learn from your mistakes, and stay committed to your vision, you'll eventually get there. In 2015, I was 25, living in a rundown apartment in a city that felt way too big for someone like me. I was barely getting by, scraping together enough to cover rent, food, and the student loans that haunted me. I had a degree in marketing, but I was stuck in a low-paying job in retail, working late hours and weekends just to make ends meet. I had big dreams, too big, probably, but they felt so far out of reach. I often found myself wondering if I was just meant to be one of those people who would never make it. I spent most of my free time scrolling through Instagram, watching entrepreneurs share their success stories. I saw people my age or younger building businesses from scratch, becoming millionaires, and living lives I could only dream of. I'd think, if they can do it, why can't I? But the truth was, I had no idea where to start. I didn't have money to invest, no experience, and no clear idea of what I wanted to do. I just knew I didn't want to keep living the life I was living. One night, I was on YouTube, deep in a rabbit hole of business videos, when I stumbled across an interview with a guy who had started a small e-commerce store selling custom t-shirts. He talked about how he started with just $500, and now he was pulling in six figures annually. Something about it clicked. The idea of running an online store was appealing to me. It seemed accessible, and more importantly, it seemed like something I could do without a huge upfront investment. The next day, I went to a local library and spent hours researching how to set up an online store. I didn't have the money to hire a designer, so I learned how to create a basic logo and set up a website using Shopify. It was an overwhelming process. I didn't know what products to sell or how to market them, but I knew I needed to start somewhere. After a couple of weeks of trial and error, I settled on a niche: custom graphic t-shirts with funny sayings and pop culture references. I figured it was a low-risk option since t-shirts were cheap to make and easy to ship. I used print-on-demand services so that I didn't have to buy inventory up front. This way, I could focus on marketing and let the supplier handle the production and shipping. I launched my store in late 2015, and it was a total flop. I didn't get a single sale. I blamed it on the market being too saturated, or maybe my designs weren't good enough. But rather than giving up, I doubled down. I started posting on Facebook groups, running small ads on Instagram, and reaching out to influencers for collaborations. Still, nothing happened. It was crushing. I was putting in hours of work, but the results weren't showing. In early 2016, I realized I had been approaching it all wrong. I was too focused on the product and not enough on the brand. I was just another person trying to sell t-shirts, and no one cared. So, I completely rebranded my store. I spent time refining the message, crafting a story behind the brand, and finding a way to connect with my audience. I renamed my store Laugh Threads, and started marketing it as a brand that was all about fun and lightheartedness. The new approach worked. Slowly, my store started gaining traction. I ran Facebook ads targeting people who liked similar brands or pages related to humor, pop culture, or memes. I began collaborating with micro-influencers, offering free shirts in exchange for posts. It was small at first, but each sale felt like a victory. By mid-2016, I was making around $3,000 a month in revenue, which was a huge improvement. However, my joy was short-lived. I realized that I was still struggling with customer service, order fulfillment, and marketing. I was overwhelmed, and it felt like I was constantly juggling a million things at once. I had to figure out how to scale without losing control of the business. The turning point came when I started automating parts of the process. I invested in a better email marketing platform to nurture leads and send out promotions to customers. I also hired a virtual assistant to handle customer service, which freed me up to focus on growing the business. It wasn't easy and it wasn't fast, but by the end of 2017, Laugh Threads was bringing in over $10,000 a month in revenue. In 2018, I decided to take things to the next level. I began investing more heavily in Facebook and Instagram ads, which significantly boosted traffic to my website. But more importantly, I spent a lot of time refining the customer experience. I improved the website, made it more user-friendly, and added better product descriptions. I also began building a community around my brand. I started interacting with customers on social media, running polls, and asking for feedback on designs. People loved the personal touch, and it made them feel connected to Laugh Threads. By the end of 2018, my business had exploded. Laugh Threads was bringing in over $100,000 in annual revenue. I was finally able to quit my retail job and work full-time on my business. I hired a team of designers, marketers, and customer support staff to help me scale even further. But there was one major problem. I was still using a print-on-demand service, and while it had been great for getting started, it wasn't scalable. The margins were thin, and the shipping times weren't reliable enough for a growing business. In early 2019, I decided to take a massive risk. I invested my savings into buying inventory up front. I sourced high-quality shirts from a reliable supplier, designed a new collection, and set up a fulfillment center. The move was risky, but it was necessary if I wanted to build a long-term business. At first, the investment drained my cash flow, but as the year went on, I began seeing the benefits. Shipping times improved, quality control became more consistent, and my profit margins grew. By the end of 2019, Laugh Threads was doing over $500,000 in revenue. I had a full-time team, a growing customer base, and a thriving brand. I was finally living the life I had dreamed of all those years ago when I was stuck in a dead-end job. But the journey wasn't over yet. In 2020, when the pandemic hit, e-commerce boomed. People were at home, shopping online more than ever, and I seized the opportunity to expand even further. I launched new product lines, introduced seasonal collections, and started offering custom orders. Laugh Threads became a household name in the humor and lifestyle apparel space. Now, in 2023, Laugh Threads is doing over $10 million in annual revenue. We have a full-time team of 50 employees, a warehouse, and an established brand with a loyal following. We've expanded into international markets, and I'm constantly working on new ideas to keep the brand fresh and exciting. What started as a small, struggling side project has become a thriving business that changed my life. Looking back, the road to success wasn't easy. It took years of hard work, learning from mistakes, and countless failures. But the key to my success was simple: persistence. I didn't give up when things got tough. I learned, adapted, and kept going. If you're thinking about starting a business or pursuing a dream, my advice is this: keep pushing forward. The road is never straight, but if you stick with it, the payoff can be incredible. I'm living proof that it's possible to build something from nothing if you're willing to put in the work. I had always been the idea guy, the one with big dreams but little action. For years, I'd get excited about new projects, but nothing ever seemed to stick. I'd start something, then drop it when the initial thrill faded. It wasn't until I reached my late 20s that I started realizing that my tendency to procrastinate and avoid commitment was the real reason for my failure. It was a hard pill to swallow, but it was the truth. It was the summer of 2018 when everything changed. I had been working as a marketing assistant for a mid-sized company in a city I had never wanted to settle in. I was living paycheck to paycheck, barely able to keep up with my bills, and feeling miserable. That was when I had a breakthrough. I was sitting at my desk, scrolling through social media, when I saw an ad for a self-made millionaire who sold products online. The ad claimed they had built their business from scratch and now made hundreds of thousands a month. I clicked on it, as most people would, intrigued but skeptical. The ad led me to a long-form sales page that laid out a step-by-step blueprint on how to start your own e-commerce business. I had seen these kinds of ads before, but something about this one resonated with me. Maybe it was the simplicity of the steps or the fact that the person behind it was relatable. They weren't some tech genius or multimillionaire from Silicon Valley. They were a regular person who had figured it out and was now teaching others how to do the same. I immediately signed up for the course. I didn't have much money, but I had just enough saved up from a side hustle I had been doing, dog walking, and some freelance writing. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I knew that if I didn't take the plunge now, I might never do it. The first few weeks were overwhelming. I had no experience in e-commerce, no real understanding of digital marketing, and zero technical skills. I spent late nights studying every module of the course, watching hours of video tutorials, reading articles, and absorbing everything I could. I even joined a few Facebook groups where people were talking about their own journeys in the e-commerce space. Some of them were making incredible money, while others were just starting out like me. The first product I decided to sell was a simple phone accessory. I chose it because it seemed easy enough to source, and the profit margins were good. The course told me to look for a supplier on AliExpress, so I did. I found a supplier that seemed reputable and placed my first order, 100 units. It was terrifying, to be honest. I spent a chunk of my savings on something that might not even sell. But I had no choice. I had committed, and I wasn't going to back out now. I spent the next few weeks setting up my online store. I built a Shopify website from scratch, which was more complicated than I had imagined. But I stuck with it. I learned how to set up product pages, create ads, and optimize my site for sales. Every night, I stayed up late tinkering with my website, making sure everything was perfect. The day I launched my store was both exciting and terrifying. I had put so much effort into this project, and now it was finally out there. I ran a few Facebook ads, targeted towards people who were interested in phone accessories, and waited. I checked my phone obsessively, hoping to see sales notifications. But nothing came. Hour after hour passed, and my store was still silent. The first sale came 3 days later. A single unit. I was overjoyed. It wasn't much, but it was proof that I had figured something out. I celebrated that sale like it was $1 million deal because it meant I wasn't just dreaming. I was building something real. But the next few weeks were a roller coaster. I had a handful of sales, but nothing consistent. Some days I would make $10, others $200, but it wasn't enough to replace my full-time job. Still, I couldn't give up. I kept tweaking my ads, changing my targeting, and refining my website. I kept learning, reading, and growing. Around the 6-month mark, something finally clicked. I figured out how to target my audience more effectively, and my ads started converting. Sales picked up. I was finally making consistent revenue. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough for me to quit my day job and work on my business full-time. I remember the moment I handed in my resignation letter. It felt surreal. I had worked so hard to get to that point, and now it was happening. From there, things started to snowball. I expanded my product range, scaled up my advertising, and began outsourcing tasks like customer service and order fulfillment. I found a supplier who could deliver products directly to my customers, so I didn't have to worry about inventory anymore. As the business grew, I hired a small team to help with the workload. Within 2 years, my company was making over $100,000 a month in sales. But the journey wasn't without its challenges. I dealt with constant competition, supply chain issues, and customer complaints. Some months, I would lose money on ads before I figured out how to optimize them. Other months, I'd be flooded with orders and struggle to keep up with the demand. There were moments when I thought I'd lost everything, but I kept pushing through, learning from my mistakes and iterating on what worked. By 2022, I had expanded into a full-fledged e-commerce brand, with multiple product lines, a dedicated team, and a solid customer base. We had a warehouse, a logistics team, and a customer service department. We were in the process of launching an international store, and I was planning on bringing in outside investors to help scale further. Looking back, it's hard to believe how far I've come. That first sale, the late night studying, the struggles with ads and product sourcing, it all paid off. I've had my fair share of setbacks, but I've never been more proud of what I've built. To anyone out there thinking about starting their own business, I have one piece of advice: just start. You'll never have everything figured out, but you can't wait for the perfect moment to start. The best time is now, even if it feels terrifying. Take the leap, learn as you go, and keep pushing forward. As of now, I'm still growing my business, and I'm not stopping anytime soon. It's a daily grind, but I'm in control now, and that's something I never had before. I may not have been the right person at the start of this journey, but through persistence and action, I became someone who could build something meaningful, and that's something I'll never forget. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.